On the afternoon she was dismissed from her family's protection. The drawing room smelled faintly of lavender and restraint. Sunlight lay politely upon polished furniture, illuminating faces arranged into practiced sympathy. No one raised a voice. No one needed to. The accusation had already been decided, spoken in careful phrases about disappointment and necessity. She sat very still, gloved hands folded, while her relatives explained that a woman who had failed to secure an heir, even through no proven fault, could no longer be risked as part of a respectable household. Their concern was framed as sorrow, their decision as mercy. Yet mercy, she understood, rarely arrived with a packed trunk waiting by the door. She listened without protest, because she had learned that grief spoken aloud only sharpened its edges. Her first marriage, brief and joyless, had ended with quiet abandonment and louder judgment. The absence of children, treated as evidence rather than circumstance, had become her defining mark. She was not accused of cruelty or impropriety, only of insufficiency, which cut deeper because it sounded so reasonable. When her mother touched her arm, it was as one might touch a keepsake before placing it away. Her father spoke of reputation. Her cousins avoided her eyes. The room, once familiar, rearranged itself around her exclusion. When she rose to leave, no one followed. Outside, the air carried the crispness of early winter, and the house behind her looked unchanged, already restored to order. She walked down the gravel drive with measured steps, refusing haste, refusing tears. The world, she told herself, had not ended. It had merely narrowed. Pride, bruised but intact, carried her forward as she calculated what remained. A small allowance, borrowed rooms, and a name spoken now only with caution. She had been trained to endure quietly, and endurance would be required of her again. In the days that followed, sympathy proved thin and conditional. Doors opened briefly, then closed. Invitations softened into excuses. Each courtesy reminded her of the reason she stood apart. She understood, with growing clarity, that society forgave many faults, but not the failure to fulfill expectation. A woman was promise made visible. Without fulfillment, she became a warning. At night, she lay awake considering how swiftly she had become a lesson rather than a person. The proposal arrived without ceremony, folded into a letter from a distant relation who believed himself kind. It offered stability without affection, shelter without illusion. A man sought a wife, the letter said, one of calm temperament and modest needs. He lived quietly, kept to himself, and walked with a limp from an old injury. There was no mention of passion or future, only the assurance that he required no heir and would not demand what fate had denied her. The simplicity of it stunned her. She read the letter again, slower this time, weighing its implications like a coin whose value must be tested. She knew of the man by reputation, though scarcely by name. He was spoken of as solitary, unremarkable, a figure glimpsed passing through villages with measured steps and lowered gaze. Some said his injury had soured him, others that it had humbled him. No one spoke of ambition. In a world that had rejected her for failing to produce, the absence of expectation felt almost like kindness. She accepted with a composure that surprised even herself, sensing not relief, but direction. Necessity, at least, moved one forward. They met on a pale morning beneath an undecorated sky. He stood when she entered, leaning lightly upon a cane, his posture careful but controlled. He was younger than she expected, his features composed rather than worn, his gaze steady, without intrusion. He did not study her openly, nor did he look away. He inclined his head and addressed her with courtesy unsoftened by pity. She answered in the same tone, grateful for the formality that spared them both from embarrassment. Their conversation was brief and precise. He spoke of a quiet life, of mutual respect, of independence preserved within marriage. She spoke of order, of gratitude, of her willingness to adapt. Neither mentioned her past. Neither asked for promises beyond what could reasonably be given. Yet as they parted, she felt a curious sensation, as though she had stepped into a current moving beneath still water. The marriage was arranged with efficiency. There were no celebrations, only witnesses and solemn words spoken clearly. She wore a gown altered from better days, its fabric remembering elegance, even if others did not. He stood beside her with an attentiveness that neither intruded nor retreated. When he spoke his vows, his voice held a steadiness that suggested intention rather than resignation. She answered with resolve, telling herself that safety was enough, that dignity could be rebuilt. As they departed together, she noticed the way he adjusted his pace to match hers, never announcing the effort. Outside the carriage window, fields passed in muted tones, hedgerows bare, the land waiting. She considered the road ahead, uncertain but no longer empty. What she could not know, as necessity carried her forward, was that this marriage had been chosen not only to escape expectation, but to embrace her. And in the quiet space between what she had lost and what she believed she had accepted, something carefully concealed prepared to reveal itself. The house he brought her to was modest in scale, set apart from the grand estates she had known, yet ordered with a quiet precision that spoke of intention. Daylight filtered through clean windows, warming pale walls and polished floors. She felt the relief of rooms that did not demand admiration. This, she sensed, was a place designed for living, not display. He moved carefully, his limp real but measured, never apologized for, never explained. She followed his pace, recognizing the courtesy in his restraint. Their days found a gentle rhythm. Mornings were separate, afternoons practical, evenings shared at a small table where conversation remained thoughtful and brief. Silence was not emptiness but space, carefully kept. She learned him through observation, how he favored order, how he listened without interruption, how his gaze lingered when she spoke of ordinary concerns. He seemed to notice everything while claiming nothing. Small considerations appeared without announcement. A shawl warmed before she felt the chill. Correspondence she dreaded was answered before it burdened her. When she praised a passage from a book, the volume itself appeared days later, mended and waiting. She thanked him each time, unease threading her gratitude. These gestures suggested familiarity, and familiarity unsettled her. Beyond their walls, society stirred. Neighbors offered cautious welcomes, curiosity sharpened by her history. She attended when required, carried herself with careful composure. At one small gathering, a remark slipped free, lightly phrased, heavy with implication. The room stilled. Before she could respond, he spoke. His voice was calm, unyielding. He named her his wife, his choice, and ended the matter. No rebuke followed, yet authority settled like dust. She felt something shift within her, a loosening she had not known was held. Afterward, she thanked him with care. He answered simply that he would not allow her to be diminished. The certainty of it followed her into sleep. Yet questions gathered. He knew her preferences too well. He anticipated discomforts she had not voiced. The intimacy of his attention both steadied and unsettled her. One afternoon, she discovered a portrait tucked away, depicting him younger, unguarded, hope evident in his expression. The contrast troubled her. When he found her there, he apologized too quickly, as if for a fault unseen. She began to understand that his reserve was chosen. That evening, rain traced the windows. She spoke at last, asking how he came to know her so well. He paused, then answered that he had observed her kindness long before necessity joined them. No more was said. The air thickened with implication. As she lay awake, she recognized the danger of hope. To be valued beyond expectation was a temptation. Yet she sensed the marriage shifting from shelter to something unnamed. When dawn came, pale and uncertain, she knew she stood at the edge of a truth he was not yet ready to give, and she was no longer certain she wished to remain unaware. The days that followed pressed gently yet insistently. He arranged their affairs with care, never consulting her, without respect. She was invited, never commanded. The household adjusted subtly to her presence, routines altered without announcement. She felt herself becoming essential in ways she had never been allowed before. Still, restraint governed their closeness. He did not touch her without cause, did not linger where silence might mislead. This discipline carried its own intensity, making each glance deliberate. She found herself listening for his steps, measuring the day by his nearness. When another invitation arrived, more formal than before, she hesitated. He noticed at once. "You are not obliged," he said. The choice he offered was genuine. She accepted nonetheless, unwilling to retreat from a life she was slowly reclaiming. The gathering proved sharper-edged. Old acquaintances watched her with renewed interest, eyes flicking between her and her husband. A question surfaced, veiled yet persistent, regarding his circumstances. He answered with grace, acknowledging his injury without apology. His composure drew attention away from her, shielding her without display. She felt gratitude deepen into something warmer, more dangerous. Returning home, she confronted him gently, asking why he endured speculation so calmly. He smiled briefly and said that freedom sometimes required misunderstanding. The answer lingered, unsatisfying yet revealing. He was choosing obscurity, not trapped by it. That night, she dreamed of doors opening onto unnamed rooms. Morning found her resolved to observe more closely. The man she had married was not what he appeared, and she sensed the revelation would alter everything she believed about choice, worth, and love. In the days that followed, she noticed signs she could no longer dismiss. Letters arrived bearing seals he broke privately. Visitors deferred to him with a respect disproportionate to his claimed station. When she asked nothing, he offered nothing, yet the tension grew. One morning, standing together by the window, she remarked that life had grown quieter. He answered that quiet was often mistaken for smallness. The word struck her like a bell, resonant and warning. She understood then that she was living beside a man who had chosen concealment, and that when truth came, it would demand courage from them both. As evening fell, she realized the central bargain of her life was shifting. She had married to escape judgment, yet found herself standing before a mystery that invited trust. In the hush before night, she sensed that the limp he bore concealed a power he had never named, and that loving him might require her to risk belief again. She retired with the knowledge that safety had transformed into question. The house seemed to wait with her, holding its breath. Somewhere within the man she had married lay a truth vast enough to undo the careful peace they shared, and as she closed her eyes, she understood that when it emerged, neither of them would remain unchanged, and the life she had accepted out of necessity would demand to be chosen anew. Tomorrow promised revelation, and she stood ready to listen fully. Morning arrived with a stillness that felt deliberate, as though the house itself had chosen restraint. Pale light gathered along the corridor floors, tracing the edges of doors left respectfully closed. She rose early, heart steady yet alert, aware that something unspoken pressed nearer with every shared silence. When she found him in the breakfast room, standing at the window without his cane, the sight arrested her breath. He did not turn at once. He seemed to be listening, not outward, but inward, as though measuring resolve. "I have misled you," he said before she could speak, voice even, stripped of ornament. He faced her then, posture upright, weight borne evenly, the limp absent or mastered. The confession did not tremble, yet it carried the cost of restraint long endured. He told her of a title inherited young, of expectations that closed around him like iron. After injury freed him from public demands, he chose obscurity, trading visibility for peace. He wished to be known without deference, loved without ambition. She listened, understanding assembling itself quietly. When he named himself Duke, the word altered the room, enlarging it without sound. She did not accuse him. Instead, she asked why he chose her. His answer was immediate. He had watched her years earlier, he said, admired how she bore small kindnesses without spectacle, how she met loss with dignity. When society marked her as insufficient, he recognized courage mistaken for failure. He wished to offer a life unmeasured by heirs, a union grounded in respect. The revelation steadied rather than shocked her. She felt grief loosen its hold, replaced by something warmer, more dangerous. They spoke then of her past, of how blame had settled upon her without proof. He answered with conviction that worth was not diminished by absence. His voice carried certainty born not of pity, but of choice. When he reached for her hand, it was the first time, and he paused until she allowed it. Her fingers closed around his, surprised by the strength she felt there, by the gentleness that accompanied it. The world did not wait. News of his identity traveled swiftly, summoned by a gathering he could no longer refuse. They entered together beneath chandeliers bright with scrutiny. Eyes widened, whisper sharpened. He stood beside her, without shield or explanation. When questions arose, he answered plainly, naming her Duchess, with pride unsoftened by apology. The room adjusted, judgment yielding to authority, then to acceptance. She felt no triumph, only release. Later, alone again, she faced him with tears unhidden. She confessed her fear of being loved conditionally, a value measured by what she could not provide. He answered with a promise simple and irrevocable, that he chose her as she was, and would continue choosing her. The words settled, reshaping her understanding of love, not as rescue, but recognition. Their days altered thereafter, not in extravagance, but assurance. She moved through spaces, once denied her, with calm authority. He walked openly now, limp acknowledged, not concealed, his presence steady. Society adapted, as it always did, to confidence. Yet within their walls, gentleness governed. They learned one another anew, without disguise. One evening, she stood before the portrait she had once studied in shadow. He joined her, remarking that hope had returned to the canvas. She smiled, seeing not the image but the man beside her. Together they had reclaimed something neither had expected, dignity without condition. As night approached, he asked if she regretted the path that led her here. She considered carefully before answering that she did not. Loss had shaped her, but love had chosen her. He kissed her brow with reverence, not possession. Outside, the estate rested, aware perhaps that its future had shifted. Yet even as peace settled, she understood that love, once revealed, demanded courage daily. The world might test them still. Standing at the window, watching dusk deepen, she held his hand, knowing that the greatest inheritance she had gained was not title, but truth. And somewhere beyond the quiet grounds, expectation waited, unaware that it no longer held dominion, and that a woman once cast aside now stood prepared to meet it, unafraid.